Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to review Wrath of Man. So, I, of course, am a little bit late to the party, I guess, this film, because I guess this film came out in May. So I'm now going out of my way to finally see this film. Currently, I will give you an option to be able to see this movie for free, but you can obviously go and Google search this and find out that currently this movie is on Sling right now. If you conveniently have Sling, you could go out of your way to say that you've seen this film because that's the convenient subscription of which it is to say. I think Google says Sling. I think when you go into Amazon, I think Amazon will say Epic, the Epic app, Epix app. So check that out. But I'm going to give you a free option. You can go on to a Google Play Store search and search the word movie apps. And you can dare, in fact, scroll down until you find an app called Play HD TV. If that is to no longer be there, you could also just Google search, of course, a app called Letter C Movies. It's one letter and one word, and you could be able to download that app and be able to, if you have both combination of those apps, then you can basically be able to see anything. You could go on to possibly go and also Google Play Store search an app called TV Crush to also triple the ability of being able to basically watch everything, because if you can't find anything on either one of those apps, you can probably possibly find it on the TV Crush app. But yeah. But there's also other apps through other reviews that I've mentioned through my time of which that I've been here. So you can conveniently go through much older reviews and see different kinds of things that I've recommended, suggested, or otherwise told you to go ahead and find things for absolutely free with some kind of ad in place. So let's not waste any of our time and let's go out of our way to go into this thing called Wrath of Man. And how did I feel about Wrath of Man? Well, I have seen a lot of the later Jason Statham films, and I had walked away from them fairly disappointed. Like, once we get past the movie Mechanic, anything that kind of has Jason Statham in it besides Expendables is really not all that great. Like, you can get a good film like Wild Card, or you can get a decent film like The Mechanic, but not the sequel. The sequel is god-awful. Or you could possibly get The Meg. That actually is a pretty decent film. It's conveniently on HBO Max right now. But a lot of Jason Statham movies are not that good. And so when I went into Wrath of Man, I'm like, oh my god, is this going to be another Jason Statham film that isn't all that good? Well, actually, I was pleasantly enjoying this film. It does kind of come across like another one of those kind of armored car films, which I believe I ended up seeing the one movie called Armor, where like it kind of feels very familiar to this. And so there is kind of armored truck kind of heist films, so this isn't drastically unique, and there is kind of that inside man kind of thing with that story also. And Armored, I believe, is the title of that movie. It's been a while since I've seen it. I think the guy who is the main guy from Wayward Pines is to be in that film, but heaven forbid I remember what Armored is about. It's been a while. So you can go and conveniently, I guess, check that movie out if I'm even saying the title right. But anyways, so going on into this film, I liked this film. I'm like, oh, thank God this is actually a good film. I actually really enjoyed it. The weird thing about this film is they're kind of telling a wraparound kind of thing where they're consistently trying to incorporate numerous different stories in one film that all eventually coincides with one another. And we do kind of have some jumping back and forth of some time where it's to, of course, go into 3 months later and then 5 months back and then 3 weeks after that. And like this movie does like tend to like jostle with its time quite a bit. And then also is to go on and tell us this certain kind of all these stories wrapped in this film, and so people may not enjoy that. People might just be like, man, this movie is all over the gosh darn place. But I actually liked it. I actually enjoyed it. Like it's probably like I would say it's better than the movie that Jason Statham and Jet Li did called I think it was War. Uh, and I thought that story was actually a pretty decent Jason Statham film. Because I've seen every gosh darn thing, evidently, that Jason Statham is to do at this point. It's coincidental. Like, it's. Because we have, like, the war movie that's kind of like a revenge film. And I really, like, I could enjoy a movie like War. So, with that said, let's go out of our way to say that what is the teeing up version of this movie? Well, it's pretty easy. Like the trailer basically tells you what's really going on in the film, but I will tell you more. So we have Jason Statham and a lot of number of other people that have kind of nicknames in this movie. Like we have a guy who in the IMDb is called Jackson, but his actual name consistently in this film is Sarge. Uh, we have kind of Jason Statham just playing this guy named H here, and he, of course, is to go on and become this new recruit for this these armored cars, and he seems to be consistently working with a guy named Bullet that he was to get trained from, but we end up seeing a lot of other kind of interesting actors put in here. Like we have like Josh Hartnett who plays Boy Sweat Dave, or and like yeah, so we have these like nicknames for everybody. But Scott Eastwood is actually so enjoyable in this movie. And eventually you'll see where he kind of comes on to be in this film. And really just kind of like the kind of I wish this guy would have gotten more screen time, or I wish that honestly Scott Eastwood would have been the main character here, because I just saw him in a movie I believe called Dangerous with Mel Gibson, and so I'm like, man, why couldn't have like Clint Eastwood been the main character here? But I get it, like Jason Statham could probably have sold more tickets technically. So so, if anything, if people are to, of course, have watched Army of the Dead recently, or possibly The Boys, it seems like quite a cluster of this cast is fairly familiar. We, of course, had the guy who is who plays Sarge here is kind of from Burden Onus, so that's pretty interesting. But, anyways, going back into here. So, H is to be this new recruit who is to go on and eventually go to his job and have people trying to rob his armored truck. Jason Statham, who is H, is to go on and stop these people from taking their money. And people are starting to get more and more blown away by H. They're like, oh my god, like, this guy is way more Rambo than we freaking thought he was. This guy is, scary, like, scary good, to where we have like Boy Sweat Dave, who is just like really literally sweating, and H is just like, are you gonna take a poop? Like, do you want me to wipe your butt after you take a dump in your pants? Because we have Boy Sweat Dave, who like was to be the guy who's to be all confidence and all, and then we have a drastic turn of events, giving us to be that H is to go on and just consistently be the hero in this story. And we now, and eventually throughout this story, we find out the H stands for hero. So really good film. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I was more impressed with this movie than I thought I was going to be. And we do have this kind of interesting heist kind of film. And I know for me, I don't really like heist films all that much. It kind of like we waste a lot of time having to put a lot of planning into a movie, which like this movie doesn't do that much of like the overall planning thing, or if they are going to be planning the heist, it's basically as a flashback while the heist is actually going on. And so I like that, where it seems like they're trying to give you the meat and potatoes, the important part of this film. And then we start to find out why H is to be the way of which that he is. We end up having H, we find out, is to be a much more skilled person than we are led to believe. And we go on and we get H's backstory of why he is this skilled guy, why he is to have fired a gun off more so than anyone is to really think, because this guy is to, of course, be this much more villainous person than we are to think here. But there's a whole reason why he is going on and doing this job. And immediately once I start to see the early stages of this movie, I'm like, oh, like I know where this movie is exactly going, and I can thoroughly enjoy it. So going into this, let's go into that double five time territory. Let's just go into spoilers about this one, because it's otherwise time again to go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about the time you to spoil this movie. So the very beginning of the film is we have H, who of course is to be hired by a guy named Terry. So we have, of course, Terry hiring H, mentioning that he had a, I guess, a guard job in Europe, and he had spent a number of years there, and it seems like he was highly recommended, and so on and so forth. So H transitions to go off and then have Bullet, kind of course, doing some rigorous training. And the training of which that H kind of goes through here, I'm like, why would anybody be doing this kind of rigorous training? I'm like, this is some kind of like military like outfit that they have H going on, and having to have like perfect precision in firing, and he is nowhere near close to that. But eventually we'll find out later that he is severely precise on his shooting. We have H having to go and like pump iron and lift weights, and I guess he's to required to be able to like go on and be this like really strong character. I'm like, this is insane. Like, why do we have all of these? Like, this kind of seems like an outlandish amount of qualifications that H is to have, but for probably people that are to probably be in an armored truck, armored vehicle position, they're like, oh no, like there are jobs that is like that. I'm like, oh, I didn't know. Like, I guess it feels more like a almost military application than it really is here. So, because I don't know that life. So we have Bullet that, of course, is to be very impressed with H, and we're now having H being the classic new guy where everybody's ragging on him, and like they're having like these photos and crap all in his locker because, again, he's the new guy. So we have H, who's not impressed with his coworkers, kind of ragging back on them when he is to rag on them, to where it's just like, oh man, like you're not gonna cut it. So, and Boy Sweet Dave, who is Josh Hartnett, is telling H, it's like, well, hey, like, I'm sure you don't really know what you're getting into here. And H is like, oh, I'm sure I'll find out. And uh, Boy Sweat Dave is telling Dave, it's like, well, hey, like, you're not the predator here, you're the prey. So, like, just kind of don't be a hero kind of thing. So, we go on and we have H and Boy Sweat Dave, and Dave is to realize that he is, of course, getting the new guy, and he is ticked because he's like, God, I don't want to train the new guy. So we have H and we have Dave who are to go off on the route, and of course, we all of a sudden have them being stopped by these robbers. And or no, wait, let's back this up a little bit. So H and Bullet are going out to this one place to go and exchange money, and it seems that and it seems that Bullet and Dave are giving H a hard time, saying that there's going to be a number of women in there that are all going to be so tempted to like want to just be like, let me give me some of that. And so both Bullet and H leave this environment, and Bullet is telling H, it's like, man, you really hold that cart really well. And H is like, well, yeah, it's been numerous years of me going through the grocery aisles, and like I know how to carry a cart. And Bullet's like, well, like what aisles are you going through? And eventually H is to mention that he's going through synthetic cheeses and in Impossible Meats. And so Bullet is just like, man, like how like times have really changed. Like instead of like us like going and eating like certain kind of meals, we've kind of turned into of course diabetics and so on and so forth. So then H, Bullet, and Dave all go into this truck, and then they go on to eventually get robbed. Post Malone is one of the robbers here, so I'm like, oh hey, yeah, Post Malone. Like I remember seeing him in some Mark Wahlberg Spencer movie at one point, and he kind of was like, it seems like Post Malone usually has to play like some kind of like thug or something like that in every one of these movies. I guess because he's just tattooed to head to toe, but like it would be cool to see Post Malone do something other than having to be like this kind of extra person in a film. It would be good to actually see him like consistently like actually having a role in a film. That'd be kind of nice for once. So, but I'm sure, hey, a check is a check, a paycheck is a paycheck. So H and Boy Sweat Dave are, of course, in their truck, and Dave is kind of panicking, and we at some point had Bullet, who was to be separated from these two other guys. And so Post Malone is saying like, hey guys, like do whatever we say or your friend here is going to get a bullet. And so it's kind of funny how like Bullet was to say that his name never really made sense because like he never really moves like one, and like maybe like he was going to get a bullet at some point, and maybe that's why they called him that. So we go on, and we of course have Dave, who is all just like, oh my god, I guess we should do what they say. And so they go on and make it to where these guys want them to stop. And so now Jason Statham's to have to toss this money into this truck, and he starts tossing it off to the side. And they're like, hey man, like make sure you toss it directly in the truck. You don't want your friend dead. So Eventually, when one of the guys gets out of the truck, H goes and shoots the guy that gets out of the truck, starts brutally killing everybody, headshot after headshot. And so everybody's like, whoa. So we end up going on having like H chase all these people down, running after Post Malone, who is trying to run away for his life, and he falls over. H has to go on and put his hand over this guy's, uh, or put his foot over this guy's hand and then shoot him in the head. And then so H goes and uncovers every single one of these guys' faces and realizes that these aren't the men that he's looking for. So we go on and we have now H going to kind of the debriefing, and there's to be these detectives going on and asking H his story, and it seems that everybody's to have the same story. And so it seems that these detectives are wanting to ask H about if anything of these other kind of robbers looked familiar to him. And so H is to kind of look and be like, yeah, like these guys definitely look familiar to me, but I'm not going to tell them that because I want them to still be out there somewhere. So supposedly Terry is to tell H, it's like, well, normally we would just kind of let you ride a desk for a month, and even later if someone was to actually die on your crew, but like we have eventually Terry who is going on talking to his superior, and his superior is telling him no, like do not punish this guy for his good work. If anything, you should actually just promote him. So H goes on and is to go out to see uh, all his other coworkers, and they're all like they're like clapping for him and all this stuff. They all end up going on and punching out for the day, and we have at one point have Dana who's going and telling and saying that H stands for hero, but we go on and 3 months down the road, the main reason why like we just have uh, H getting this kind of thing here, this kind of uh, consistent camaraderie and whatever between these guys. But let me finish this up with this one story, and then we'll get to the 3 months later. So we have H who's going to pool because I guess that's the requirement that every new guy is to come and play pool with them. And so all of a sudden, because H is to be replacing one of his coworkers, we end up having a guy named John who's kind of ticked that H is kind of taking his job. So we have John who is like ticked at H, but H is to go on and do this kind of like social magician work. His bullet is to say weirdly like man, you are a social magician. Like, and so H is to go on and give this guy like, hey man, like here's a free round, but just go off and do it over there. And so the guy is to go on and get his beer and leave because H is not going to take any guff from John. And so we transition to 3 months later, and so now we end up having H again in another armored car scenario with Bullet, where all of a sudden these guys are to go on and spray paint this armored truck and are trying to rob it. And we have it where they gas the truck, and so they're forcing these guys to get out of the truck. Bullet is forced to get out of the truck, and H goes onto the back of the truck, which I'm like, okay, why is he doing that? There's so many things that I want to question here through this movie. And so H goes on and is to open the back of the truck to have a kind of towel over his face, and he then goes and chucks this bag and then is looking at all the guys, and the movie stops. And so when they go on to do the second interview thing about H, and it's like, okay, this story makes no sense. Why did the guys just all walk away from you? And H is like, well, that's what happened. And so we found out that literally, like, that's what the guys just did. They all just saw H and they all decided, like, heck no, like, we're going to walk away from this. So now we have to find out H's backstory and now why he is to be this kind of guy. Because H is to go off and sleep with Dana and then wake up in the middle of the night to have her sit by this couch and say, hey, why do you have all this massive amount of money? Like, tell me. So Dana is not telling him anything, and so H is to start firing bullets off of a gun with a silencer. And so Dana finally confesses that she was to find this money, and it's like 125 grand or something like that, or $125,000 or something, I don't know. And that's her little nest egg for her to retire off of. And so H is saying, you know what? Like, I'll let you keep this money as like kind of hush money here, but like if you go and you tell anybody of what I just like told you, like look at the photos of your parents that I just took like X amount of days ago. And it's like, oh my god. H is like, yeah, so like keep your mouth shut. So dang, like man, he slept with her and then he turned around and like threatened her life. Oh my god. Wow. So because we end up finding out that H is actually connected to these mob-like characters. These guys called Hollow Bob, and Mike, and God, where is the other one here? Moggy, 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 and so H, of course, is to go on and have him and his son Dougie going out for some kind of event, and all of a sudden we have H who's getting a call, and he is told that he needs to go and check out this one location to see where some armored car is going, because everyone else is busy for some odd reason. We have Moggy who is going and checking out this one thing so he can't leave. We end up having one guy who, because of a drunk driver and because of an accident, this guy can't go anywhere. Hollow Bob. And so H is to go on, and all he has to do is tell where the direction of this armored car is heading, either left or right. And so H has to leave Dougie by this car and is to, of course, to tell them that it's going right. So that's all that he had to do. So all of a sudden, Dougie is going on to watch as this armored car is to make it down this road that he is on, and all of a sudden there is to be a heist happening, that has nothing to do with H's men, and has a bunch of guys that are on another team that are to be, of course, with Jan, who is Sam Eastwood, and that's all that we really see here. Uh, and these guys named Sarge and Carlos and any number of other people. Brad, Sam, Tom, the list goes on and on. So we go on here, and we have, of course, this whole thing playing out where these, excuse me, these security guards are to get killed, but one person is to find Dougie on the side of the road as some witness, and so they end up plugging the witness, and H is to go and scramble down the road, just be like, hey, like, how, like, yeah, like, and so H ends up getting shot up because he, of course, was to try and stop them from killing his son, and H didn't realize that it wasn't actually their people, or he realizes that it wasn't actually a familiar face. And so Dougie ended up getting shot in the process. So now H is to go on and ask Mike and ask his guys to go and find who were the people that done this job. Go and basically put a bag over people and force them to tell them who had done this. And so we go on and we have them just consistently getting nowhere. And so they keep having to like torture people for no information to really come out of this. And so eventually what forcibly has to happen here is Mike is turning to H and telling him, it's like, well, like, I think it's probably an inside job, so more than likely you might have to go and get hired at this Fortico company and see eventually if you can find these people again, because it seems like they are consistently doing this same armored car job. So we then have, of course, H going on and getting this other identity and going and working in this company, Fortico. And that's where we kind of see eventually this lead up now. And all of that was taken, all of the stuff about H, all of his backstory was 5 months earlier than what was going on here. So we went 3 months later to just go 5 months back. And because we eventually have it where 3 weeks after that whole 5 month period, we had Jason Statham coming out of the hospital wanting to figure out who had killed his son. And H also wanted the coroner's report saying how his son was to die. So that way, when he is to find the guy who shot his son, he can recreate that same blood or those same kind of shots to replicate, and so on and so forth. So now we have to turn around and tell the other side of the sword here. We have to tell the other story. So we now have a group of, I guess, ex-military guys that are, of course, wanting to find work, and it's tough for any of them to go and find work. So all of them are to, of course, go on and have certain either security jobs or just kind of common jobs. And so we have, I think, Carlos here, who is mentioning that he wants to go on and steal from one of these rich people that, of course, are to be having him be their security guard. So this team decides, it's like, well, like, why don't we just do that? Like, why don't we just do that and gets a pretty decent payout? So they go on and they, of course, plan this whole thing out, take from these people, but the payout honestly isn't all that big. I think altogether, I think they ended up getting like 18 grand between all of them. And they're like, yeah, that's not a really big score. So they go on and they decide, well, like, how about we go on and uh, how about we go and start stealing from armored cars? Like, that sounds like a better thing to do here. That seems like a much more reasonable crime. So, but here's the kicker. We end up finding out that Bullet is actually their inside man, where Bullet is to tell these guys, like, hey, what's going on? What's the routes? Where is everybody? And so on and so forth. And so eventually now how it's to, of course, be set up is that these guys were to go on and steal from this armored car before it was to go and leave where it was to, of course, be taking the money from, because these two guys are with these two carts, and so these guys who are all dressed as these janitors go and have a gun to these guys and are to, of course, tell them, like, well, hey, like, give me all your money kind of thing. This is a stick up. So we now come to a head here where now we, of course, have Sarge, who is to mention, it's like, well, hey, like, I figured out an even bigger score, an even grander score for us to do, but it's like an all or nothing thing. It could possibly be a suicide mission because of how risky this is. So all of these guys are to have to forcibly be head to toe in body armor to be able to get through this mission, because it's a pretty extravagant mission. And there's some heavy artillery going on also in this mission also. So they go through the whole, like, rundown of the plan, which I'm not going to go through and do that, while the plan is basically going on. So the first thing that, of course, has come up is that H and Bullet are driving along, and so Bullet goes on and tells H, hey, like, I'm going to tell you the truth. Like, I'm kind of working with some men that are, of course, to go and take from armored cars. And, like, I am going to tell you that your gun has no bullets in it, so don't try to be a hero here because you won't have any bullets in your gun. Like, wouldn't it have been sweet if, like, Jason Statham would have been just like, well, I have another gun, and pow! What? Did you think that I would not know that my gun has no bullets in it? So, but Bullet is to explain to H what all is going to go on here, and Bullet is telling H, it's like, well, hey, like, if you go on and you do everything that I tell you right here now, like, you'll be alive. You'll be alive at the end of this. Like, this is the thing that you're going to get at the end of this is just your life. You're not going to get a pay cut. You're not going to get any kind of in. You're just going to get out of this alive. Because Bullet knows good and well that this guy is a hero and that he'll go and he'll try to save and he'll try to do anything. So we have Bullet going off to this place where he's turning off his cameras, and we have the guy who is to kind of watch over all the cameras in the cars. He's telling Bullet, it's like, well, hey, man, like, what's up with your camera? Like, this is not a time to be messing around. It's Black Friday, and like, this isn't a time to just mess around. So Bullet is saying, saying that he will fix it. So they end up going and taking out H and zip tying him, and then getting all the, of course, armored guys into the armored car. And then they head back to headquarters, and so everybody is seemingly to be done for the day. And so we all of a sudden end up having it where the guys are to, of course, head out and try to hold this whole Fortico company hostage, basically, going on and telling them to open up these specific doors so they can get to certain bigger payouts. And so it seems that Bullet is to play this innocent guy, but then we end up finding out that Bullet is going off and finding every single one of these characters and going and shooting them and murdering them. Because Dana and a guy with her is kind of in one of these armored cars. And actually, there's to be her and two other guys. And so they're first going and staying in their armored car, but they realize that they should go on and try to do something. And so once they do, eventually we just have Bullet who comes near them and is saying like, hey man, give me one of your guns. And so he ends up killing all of them. And we end up having one of them who ends up getting killed by one of Sarge's men. So we go on and we have, of course, Boy Sweat Dave, who is to eventually be tied up with Terry in some part of this office somewhere, and H is to be dragged in this one room and to be told to have his nose facing the ground. So we go on and we have them break through this one seemingly unbreakable room where they end up having to use explosives, and they have to have like some really substantial body armor here because these guys are going to have some massive weaponry with them here. So like we start to have like certain armor piercing rounds kind of things going on here. So we have these guys eventually breaking through and getting all the money that they need to grab. So eventually what happens is that H is to go on and take down one of these guards and like rear naked like choke one of these guys, or just really just choke one of these guys from behind. And then H is to go on and take the armor from one of them and start to go through and take some of these guys down. We end up having, I think, Brad, who is to be the one early guy that ends up getting killed here. But then we start to have certain armored guys starting to get killed one way or the other. We have eventually one of the armored men going after Dave and I think Terry. And Dave ends up getting shot, but I guess he's not killed here. So H goes back and starts to grab onto this one guy and is to, of course, start to like fight him and try to take him down, and eventually tries to have this guy shoot himself, but instead H goes on and grabs this guy's knife because I think they run out of bullets at this point, and H just goes and stabs this guy in the neck and kills him off brutally here. And so H, now having like this helmet that's kind of like half broken now, he takes his helmet off, and I'm like, oh my god, like Jason Statham looks so like cool here. He just so looks like a man on a mission. And we have like Dave who's looking on, and he's like, "Oh my god, look this guy," because at this point H is to kind of lose his persona, where we have both Dave and we have both H, or we have both Dave and Terry who are running off trying to save themselves. And so I think Terry at one point is to ask H, like, "What do you think we should do?" And H is like, "I don't give an F what you do." Like, I don't care. Because you're gonna, like, I don't care if you live or die anyways. Like, your life isn't in my hands. Like, I'm just after these freaking guys. So, we we of course now have the guys who are kind of concerned about when SWAT is going to arrive here, and so they're trying to get as much money as quickly as possible to then eventually get everything like prepared and put away before SWAT is to get here. So all they have to do is just ram through these cop cars, which these cop cars can't get into this environment. They just have to just put up a perimeter. And so we have Jason Statham trying to shoot out these armored guys, and he continues to try to get at them. Dave, also realizing that he should go and try to be a hero here, is trying to also take down certain of these armored guys also. And so we have Bullet, who is telling uh, Dave, it's like, "Hey man, like I got him, like come out and help me." And Dave is like, "Bullet, what the heck is going on?" And so Bullet, of course, ends up shooting up Dave and killing him, and I'm like, "Oh, that's too bad." Like, he tried to step up and do the right thing. He could have just hid and cowered and whatever, but no. So Bullet has basically murdered all of his people, all of his coworkers, because um, here's the weird thing, though. We had the one guy who was, like, manning the cameras, and when the one guy was coming in there to zip tie this guy, it seems weird because this guy was already having his hands prepared to get zip tied. I'm like, it's obviously feels like he planned for himself to get zip tied. I'm like, wow, that's kind of a one ruining thing of this film. Like, they couldn't have cropped this footage or panned up a little bit to like just not show this guy like obviously preparing for his hands to already get zip tied. It seems like a little bit of garbage there. They could have had some kind of like, "Hey man, like put your hands behind your back because get ready to get zip tied." But that's the one kind of part of this movie. But oh well, there has to be something that kind of shows that this is a film at some point. So we go on, like, because out of all the good things, that has to be the one kind of kind of thing. So we push on. So Sarge and his men are all in this armored truck, and their game plan is to go into this secret tunnel, like where I guess there is a number of secret tunnels where this armored car evidently is to not get followed, I guess, conveniently for this film. So these guys are to have these two four-wheelers meeting them there, and so they go and they put all of the cash in these four-wheelers. And so Sarge, of course, is holding his neck. He's bleeding out. And so Sarge is going on and talking to his his guy who's planning this all out in this flashback. And so Sarge is saying, it's like, well, hey, like, if any of the guys are to die in this mission, were to, of course, go on and take care of their families. And the one guy is turning to Sarge, and it's like, well, what about Jan? Like, do you think that he's gonna go off and try to kill us all? Because like that guy seeing that massive amount of money, like that's the only guy I'm really worried about here. Is that this guy is gonna wanna kill us all off so that way he can get this massive payday. And Sarge is just like, well, he's a soldier, he'll do what he's told. And we end up finding out wrong that Jan, of course, is to be heavily greedy here and is to go and slit the throat of Sarge as he's basically bleeding out anyways. And then we have, of course, Bullet going with, I guess, a pallet jack and a pallet full of money, and is now asking where Sarge is, and Jan is telling Bullet that he's dead. So we go on and we have Jan and we have Bullet, who are, of course, to stack these four-wheelers, drive all the way to this vehicle, and we're assuming that both Jan and Bullet are going to get it into this vehicle and drive away, right? No. We end up having, of course, Jan going and shooting Bullet because Bullet was possibly going to kill Jan here. And so Bullet dies, Jan gets away with the money, and so we also had the one moment where Sarge was going and seeing that Jan is to have, of course, at one point not done what he was supposed to, because he, of course, was to kind of hide away his money and not buy anything too flashy or too big or anything like that, to just kind of not kind of put any red flags up. And Jan did the exact opposite, where it's like, Sarge is like, I'm sorry, with your kind of means, how exactly are you coming up with this money? And Jan is just like, well, hey, like I do what I want, kind of thing. So we now go on and we have Jan, who is now at the end of this kind of in his lavish lifestyle of motorcycles and money and whatever, and he's like, yeah, I won, like I beat this, yeah, like I outsmarted all these guys and half of them died regardless anyways. So all of a sudden we now end up having a cell phone going off, and it's like, okay, so Jan is to go and figure out where this cell phone is to, of course, be coming from. And he finds out that the cell phone is in a stack of money. And so then H is to tell Jan, it's like, well, aren't you going to answer it? And of course it's H. Because I guess that was an easy way for H to track down where this money was going to end up at the end of this. Smart plan. So H is to now go and toss the coroner's report for Dougie to Jan, and for Jan to read all of it, because Dougie was, of course, shot in the liver, lungs, spleen, and heart, and like at some points we weirdly have some kind of like kind of chapter names in some part of this movie, where we have like Bad Animal Bad, where we also had Sarge, who had a birthday, and all of the soldiers were eating the birthday cake, and the wife was coming in for Sarge's cake, of like, hey, like, are you guys gonna eat up all the cake here? And Sarge is like, well, bad animals, bad, yeah, like, yeah, like, sorry, hun, like, so we have, of course, where H is to tell Jan that, like, yeah, the guy that you killed, his name is Dougie. It's my son. So H goes in and starts shooting exactly where Dougie had gotten shot. And so we have, of course, H, who just walks away here. And we end up having this agent who, of course, is working with H. And he, of course, is Agent King, and he was to go on to be working with H and kind of helping him out here to figure this all out. But then Agent King was also saying, it's like, well, there's only so long that I can pretend to look confused about what's really going on here. And H is like, okay, like, I'll get that. Like, I'll go and I'll, in 20 weeks, do what you can't do in 20 years and take out these men. And so we have Agent King who goes on and cleans this whole thing all up. And H is to walk away not wanting any massive payout, not wanting to get any of this money. No, he just wants to go back to his same old life, I'm assuming, and walk off his injuries. And that's it. So H gets to walk off into the sunset, and another movie done and reviewed and whatever. Again, a really enjoyable movie. It was a really satisfying Jason Statham film compared to a lot of other ones that he has ever put out. So without a doubt, I think I'm going to get out of here. So goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.